Sergei Karjakin is currently defending home turf for Mother Russia in Moscow, but will he be able to hold on as the second half of the candidates tournament kicks off? Abhijeet Gupta just won the Reykjavik Open in Iceland with an outstanding 8.5 out of 10 performance. We break down that tournament and all of its action. And speaking of outstanding performances, Hu Yifan is once again the women's world champion as she takes down Maria Musichuk. ChessCenter, not for the boring at chess heart, lactose intolerant, or gluten-free, and it starts right now. Sean, with the candidates tournament now nearly halfway through, the biggest surprise in most people's eyes this week was the stunning performance by Sergei Karjakin. Hometown boy, Mother Russia is defended, at least for now. Do you expect Sergei to hold on in the second half, and how surprised have you been by his performance?
Well, let me tell you, I wrote Sergei personally. Somebody's got to stop Anand, I said, and I think you're the guy to do it. Maybe we should have seen this coming. He did come in second at the previous candidates, and he had a win in Norway in 2014. But even so, I was decently surprised to see him come up. And you know what? My pick is still with Levon. He's hanging in there just a half point behind. And I expect him to pick up a little more momentum as the tournament goes on.
Well, yeah, your pick is looking better than mine, of course, with Hikaru Nakamura still struggling to find his form. But I'll admit I didn't see Sergei coming. But like you said, he performed so well in his last Norway invitation. Also the World Cup you failed to mention, in addition to the second place finish at the last candidate. So I know you're happy he beat Vishy. I think pretty much everybody is if you don't live inside India. Not because we don't love Anand, but because we've seen that movie before. It's time for a new movie. Will Karjakin be the star of the upcoming film? In New York, the World Championship match, of course, is where that metaphor ends. Nobody knows yet, but for more information on the candidates, we are going to jump over to featured news now and let Peter Doggers check in live from Reykjavik. Now, as we jump over to featured news and hopefully welcome Peter Doggers, we don't see him. Peter, you didn't fall out of the window, did you?
Hey Danny, no, everything is okay. You're looking out the window to the Harpa Convention Center in Reykjavik, Iceland. I'm still here. The Reykjavik Open has just finished, but let's talk about that later and first jump into the candidates.
Yeah, well, we've been covering all the coverage from Moscow, of course, following your news reports and our video recap. Sean and I were just discussing the surprising start by the hometown hero, Sergei Karjakin. Maybe he really was someone who people should have been picking as a favorite to win the event. But what's been your take on how the quality of play so far, and Karjakin's big start?
Yeah, well, Karjakin seems to be doing very well at the moment, but he also profited from a mistake. Let's first go to the first round where it was Anand who started with a win against Topalov, but both 40-plus players, didn't look too sharp. Both made some mistakes, so seemed a bit nervous there actually. And then in that second round, Karjakin profited from a huge mistake by Nakamura, which we will see in Blunder of the Week actually. And then in the third round, again only one winner. It was Levon Aronian who scored a point. Again, Veselin Topalov. He suffered his second loss, not looking good there. And then in the fourth round, Karjakin scored his second win against Vishy Anand again, and that was in fact the very first win ever for Karjakin against the Indian. Which was a statistic I couldn't believe, but it's true actually. And now today 4 draws in Moscow, so Karjakin still a half point ahead of the pack. And I must say, before the tournament I didn't really see him as a big favorite, but why not actually? He was second in the last candidates behind Anand.
Yeah, and obviously there's been some good and shaky play. We talked about off camera, Anish Giri showing some really good preparation, holding against some tough and aggressive tries by Hikaru Nakamura and Sergei Karjakin. But then some nerves, right? Hikaru's blunder, some really weird shaky play by Caruana after getting a totally winning position against Topalov. So let's see if play stabilizes in the second half and Karjakin can hold on. But let's move back to where you are, and I don't know that we need any other intro into the Reykjavik Open than Abhijeet Gupta, 8.5 out of 10. Explain that outstanding performance.
Yeah, Gupta, Indian Grandmaster, has won a few Open tournaments already, and he was looking really good here in Reykjavik. In fact, in a very important phase, rounds 7 to 9, he beat Shabalov, Movsesyan, and Grandelius in a row. and in a great style. I wanted to compare him with Vladimir Kramnik, actually. Similar openings, similar style, very positional, and long games, very accurate play in endings. So really strong player. And in our show, actually in our live show, he said that when he's not playing tournaments, he studies for about 6 hours a day. So working hard on his chess and on his openings and everything. So I wouldn't be surprised if he would slowly grow to the 2700 group.
Well, that's high praise coming from you as someone who's followed Vladimir Kramnik's career very closely. Now, another really great performance by an Indian, maybe soon-to-be Grandmaster, was Tania Sachdev. She earned her second GM norm. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, she earned her second GM norm yesterday. She only needed a draw, and she was almost winning against Movsession, actually. It did end in a draw, but that sealed the deal for her, the second GM norm. And very often players, after securing a norm, they somehow seem to lose their very next round game in a silly fashion. But even today, Tanya played an excellent game and drew against Belyavsky. So she just played very good tournament. She's below 2400 now, but she played like a grandmaster.
Well, congratulations to her and her countrymen. I think we're going to let you get back to what seems like a surprisingly nice day there in Iceland.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite funny. The first day when I arrived, it was sunny. Then during the tournament, I've only seen clouds in the sky. And now the tournament's over and the sun is back. So yeah, well, let's see how Moscow weather will be. Because next week's ChessCenter, I will be at the candidates.
Well, a chess player's life, traveling from one maybe bad weather location to another. But hopefully that's not the case for you, Peter. We look forward to your exclusive interviews and all the coverage on site as the candidates wraps up.
See you next week.
Bringing in Grandmaster Robert Hess now for Move of the Week. Robert, first I have to say just how much smarter those chess books make you look. Is this like a prop setup? Are those even real? Could you open one for us to prove it?
Yeah, absolutely. I got Zurg 1953 right here. Let's just open that. I mean, I love this book. I remember reading it as a child. Just fantastic stuff. And here we got Vladdy Kramnik in his vintage shades.
I noticed you hit Aaron Nimzovich just so you'd look a little better next to that, next to that stallion. Well,
I gotta
we're going to
do what I
jump into
can.
the game now. A game from the Reykjavik Open, and a little bit of a strange way for us to dive into Move of the Week, given that it's not because it was that impressive, but more because it was just that shocking and worthy of note that a Grandmaster of Richard Rapport's level would meet Knight F3 with, drumroll please,
H6. I mean, what a disrespectful move to play against your opponent, but it only gets worse. After E4, he goes G5. Danny, what would you do if we were playing a game and I started with this opening?
Well, first of all, I ask myself if you got up and Hikaru Nakamura playing Bullet sat down. But assuming that wasn't the case, I mean, I don't know. I'd try to just play some decent chess. And that's what his opponent, Grigorians, does here. But we're going to dive into this game just to show how funny it got, because Grigorians did exactly what you would do, right? And then developed a solid plan. And guess what Rapport did here before move 10? Puts a pony on h5. You know why? Because why not? That's why. And he just continues to play chess. Like I said, the only way to describe it is, was this a game between Amon Hamilton or some random chess bra and Hikaru Nakamura on Chess.com? Because that's what it seems like, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it gets just weirder as the game goes on. I mean, White is playing principal chess. Black is doing anything he can not to play principal chess. And eventually we get to a position where it gets really broken open. And they agree to a draw at the end of this whole sequence in a position where White is standing much better. So as we get there to the end here, they just shook hands, split the point. I guess the weirdness overcame both of them. But here, Bishop C1 for White just looks like White is doing very well. And with an E7 square being vulnerable, it just looks a great position for Grigorian. So I don't understand why he took a draw.
I agree totally. It almost makes you want to scream foul play, not to accuse players of that level. And I really don't think Rapport would do that. But did they just agree to a draw beforehand and then just decide to roll the dice? Because there's no way White isn't better here. The H6 pawn is falling. The bishop is coming to C1, as you said, highlighting the potential fork town, right, which is not a happy relocation, kind of like when your wife gets a job and you don't really want to move and you realize that it's like, okay, things are going to get awkward. You got to give in. That's the kind of fork town that the Black King Queen are heading for, Robert. And I agree with you totally. Well, we're going to tip our hats to Richard Rapport and give him Move of the Week in this little bit off-brand segment of Move of the Week, and let you get back to learning something from those books behind you. And pro tip, don't follow Rapport's games if you expect to see some principled and disciplined chess. Bringing in FIDE Master Mike Klein now, I don't have to tell him that there are just so many storylines going on in the chess world these days. It's almost impossible to squeeze them all into just 2 news segments. But with Peter already touching on the candidates and Abhijeet Gupta's incredible performance in Reykjavik, Mike, I think we should start things off with another incredible performance, that by Ho Yifan, righting the wrong, reclaiming her place as women's world champion. Tell everybody how she did it.
Well, that's the headline right there, Danny. She did, in fact, get her world title back against the hometown hero, Maria Musicchuk. Congratulations, though, to Maria, even though a 6-3 score doesn't look like she did very well. That's about what the rating disparity would suggest she should do. And also, she lasted longer than the last 2 times the Women's World Championship has gone to a match. Recall, Danny, that it flip-flops every year between a World Cup-style format and a 10-game match. In 2011, Humpy Kineru could only hold out 8 games. And in 2013, it was even worse. Anna Ushanina could only hold out 7 games. So although Maria did not notch a win, 6-3 wasn't too bad. She really got off to a bit of a rocky start before holding her own. But I thought it was also kind of nice to draw a parallel here between Magnus. When Magnus won his second world championship in 2014, he only needed to draw in game 11, but yet he went for the win anyway. Of course, there was no risk in his position. That's Magnus being Magnus. But Ho Yifan did the exact same thing. She was never worse in game 9, and yet she still pressed and won a really nice end game. So that's the way to win your world title back in style, Danny.
I agree, and great examples set by the best 2 players in the world in their respective genders, because we know young people are watching them all the time, so I tip my hat to both of them. And speaking of playing for wins and fighting spirit, we move on to Blitz Deathmatch 37, where Ruslan Ponomariev took on Francisco Vallejo Pons, and it was exciting. Fireworks, blunders, the train wreck everyone wants to see when they watch chess on the web. Tell everybody what happened in the match.
Well, I'm not sure about that train wreck, Danny, if you mean us, Ponho, or Paco, but it started out with a few technical difficulties by Chess.com. We were trying to bring sort of a live feed to the players. We'll get that sorted out for the Grandmaster Blitz Battle Series next month. But then we had Ponomaria forget it was daylight savings. Sorry, 17th century farmers, for inventing that. He lost the first 2 games by forfeit. First time I can recall that happening in deathmatch history. And then once the games got going on, Vallejo hung his queen, and that was in the 5-minute section. Now, later on, Ponomaria, former FIDE world champion, he hung a rook, just basically left it to be captured. So it wasn't the cleanest of matches, but I will say, a lot of fighting chess, unpredictable result. We had the lead change back and forth, and in the bullet, we had kind of a Tal Botvinnik situation. We had a game 1 in the penultimate game by Ponomaria, and that forced Vallejo to win the final game to tie the match. Only unlike the 1950s FIDE rules, we have a playoff at Chess.com. And in the very first playoff game, Vallejo showed who was the true Spaniard, and he won as black to take Deathmatch 37, quite a prequel into next month's Grandmaster Blitz Battle opener.
Yeah, and great segue there. Of course, I'll take a chance to mention that Alexander Grishuk, reigning World Blitz champion, will take on Levon Aronian on April 6th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. Mark your calendars. Don't be anywhere. The games will begin right there on April 6th. Mike, thank you for your contributions here, and we will see you in time trouble.
I'll see you at the end, Danny.
Moving on to the biggest tournament in the world right now, of course, talking about the candidates event from Moskva and the hometown hero leading the way. It all got started when Hikaru Nakamura, the American favorite, made a huge blunder in this position. But Robert, I'm going to you talk a little bit about probably why Hikaru missed the ultimate move that Karjakin had, and why it's actually was an understandable blunder, as horrific as it was, based on how strong players visualize and calculate positions.
Yeah, absolutely, Danny. Here, Karjakin had just played the move pawn h2 to h4, which looks like it weakens the king side. So Hikaru picked up the gauntlet and took on g3. Now let's take a moment here after knight takes g3 to look at the c7 square. It's protected by the knight on e6, the bishop on b6, and the queen on e7. But as we see the tactical sequence unfold, we'll see exactly why the c7 square is the key and vital unprotected square. So after take on g3, take on d4, we take everything off and queen e3 check. After queen f2, Queen takes d3, regaining the piece, and now rook c7. f7 is under attack, and if queen takes f7, queen g7 will be mate next, and the bishop on b7, of course, is on pre, so that ends the game on the spot. An understandable blunder, considering at the beginning the c7 square was so well defended, but as our coaches always tell us, when we get to the end of a variation in our head, we always have to calculate one move further, and if Hikaru Nakamura had done so, he would have seen that after all of this, rook c7 was end of story.
Yeah, great points, and I love the tip you give our fans because I hope that they pay attention. I'll show quickly how, of course, the game was just an easy win for Karjakin from here. Now I'm saying Fabiano, no, Hikaru resigning in just a few moves, but you make a great point that I think one of the biggest traps people have is evaluating combinations, expecting them to just always work, and in cases where you have the discipline to ask yourself just one simple thing. At the end of this line, what is my opponent's next move, right? Not just focusing on the advantages you've gained, but visualize the position in your head. What is your opponent's next move? That's how blunders are made. Usually it's not an I go there, he goes there calculation mistake, but a lack of properly visualizing the position at the end of this road and really asking yourself what both sides have available there, because if they did, he would have seen rook c7 because it's and the way I always prove that to my students, I'm going to go on with what you said, Robert, because I think it's a great instructional point, is I ask them this way to prove the point that they didn't do that. I said, if this position right here was in front of you and I told you white to play and win, would you ever miss rook to c7? And the answer is always no, right? And it just proves the point that that's where the calculation, the habits of having the right discipline in your approach must be instilled. Of course, Hikaru knows all this and much more than both of us, but it shows that even the best makes mistakes. And it was a very helpful win to give Karjakin the boost that he has now. Maybe a huge surprise that everybody overlooked, despite some really stellar performances over in Norway and at the World Cup. So Karjakin is showing that he is a formidable force, still one of the absolute best chess players on the planet, and we'll see if he can hold strong in the second half of the tournament. Here's what everyone's talking about this week, Sean. The controversy surrounding the candidates because of Aegon's decision to block the live transmission of the moves had everybody and their cousin and their best friend's lawyer saying something about it on Twitter, on Facebook. Of course, we're going to get into what Aegon released as far as their statement about the potential DDOS attack that may or may not have occurred. But before we do, Sean, tell me what some of your favorite comments were made on social media.
Well, of course, one of mine goes to Malcolm Payne, who says, looks like Vichy is mating Veselin. Am I allowed to say that? Because, of course, he's talking about up-to-date moves, and Aegon had said that those were not allowed to be shared. I think the ultimate irony, however, is that Aegon's own broadcast has to go and look at ChessBomb, who is at that point, according to them, pirating the moves in order to get the moves for the games they're broadcasting. So I think that was kind of the ultimate irony there.
It certainly was. And on that note, why did they have to do that? Well, as you see here from a statement released by Aegon, a chart showed with the peak in traffic where they claimed the DDoS attack occurred, but there was no real proof or any data really released. And so because of that, the image I'm showing you now from Mig Greengard, of course known as Garry Kasparov's right-hand man and partner for many years, made a funny chart. Of course, we're blacking out the last letters to avoid the profanity being on the show. We apologize to young ones if even that is offensive. But you see here, he makes some funny points about the charts really don't really mean a lot, even though people love charts. And without concrete information, no one really knows what happened. Aegon did have to rely on some of the other sites in a strange twist of fate. But what matters now, Sean, is that good chess is being played on the board, at least by some. And everyone's focused on who's going to have a chance to play Magnus Carlsen. It'll be interesting to see how this entire controversy plays out, not only for the future of chess, but for the rest of this year, building up to the World Championship match in November. Time will tell, but of course, we will be bringing everybody everything they need to see as far as social media is concerned each week on ChessCenter. We look ahead toward the end of the candidates tournament and make our best predictions at what's going to happen in the critical matchups. Of course, right now we know that Karjakin has jumped out to the lead, currently just by a half a point over some, a full point over most. And as we look at maybe his most challenging games moving into the back half of the tournament, where do we start with that, Robert?
Well, it starts with his game against Fabiano Caruana. He has the black pieces against Fabiano, and if Fabiano is going to make a move, he needs to take out Karjakin in round 6. Otherwise, he's been playing great chess, that is Caruana, but he's missed opportunities against Topalov and against Aronian, so he needs to make a move against the Russian player.
Great point, especially with the white pieces. I can't argue with you. Staying at round 6, another potentially critical matchup, if the other American is ever going to get back into this, is his game against Aronian with black. He doesn't have a great record against the Armenian, and with the black pieces, this could be a very telling game as to whether or not Nakamura will hang around and make a move or fall toward the bottom half of the standings at the candidates. You agree?
Absolutely. He's a very bad record against Levon Aronian, who I think is 11-6 and with a bunch of draws in Aronian's favor. And Hikaru is definitely capable of taking out Aronian. He beat him with the black pieces in Norway Chess 2015, but Levon is a new player right now in Sinkfield Chess, and he had a dominant performance to win that. And since then, he's been on fire, and he currently stands at +1. And with the white pieces against Hikaru, he's going to look to increase his score.
Now, what are the Dutchman's chances? Of course, Vichy Anand I don't think is out of it either, but Giri has never lost to the former world champion, which is a big deal. With only a single win, though, we know Giri, of course, has his very drawish style. But what chances do you give the Dutchman to hang around and maybe have a chance to win the tournament if he can beat Anand?
You know, he's at an even score, and we, crack jokes about how he's the most drawish player in the field, which is likely true, but he does have that +1 score against Anand with a bunch of draws. He beat him with white in the Bilbao Masters in 2015. So I like Giri's chances if he can win that game. He needs to boost his confidence to play a little more aggressively, but I think Vichy is actually a good opponent for him, where he can outplay the former world champion and get off the draw board and into the driver's seat with a win.
Of course, that being a game that will happen in round 7. Sticking with round 7, Karjakin's next potential critical matchup. Of course, we'll see how he does against Caruana with black. But if he, let's say, scores well against Caruana, now he's got white against Aronian. What do you see breaking down in round 7 between Karjakin and Aronian?
Well, that's a great pairing for Karjakin with the white pieces, but he has a very bad history against Levon Aronian. I think it's something like 9-3 in the Armenians' favor. But this is a new Karjakin. He's been underestimated by everyone, and he's in great shape in this tournament. So with the white piece against Levon, I don't really see him losing, but he does have to be careful considering his track record.
Great point. Now, once we get to the back half of the tournament, we're not going to preview the whole second half, of course, because we will get one more episode of ChessCenter before it's all said and done. But got to start off in the battle between the two Americans. Round 8 will show Caruana playing Nakamura, this time with the white pieces. What do you expect to go down there?
Well, it all depends on the next 2 rounds before they get to their head-to-head matchup, because a lot can happen. If Caruana can springboard atop the lead with a win over Karjakin, or if Hikaru can hold steady and maybe get a win of his own, things will definitely be different by the time round 8 comes. However, it's all about the nerves, and Fabiano has shown himself to not have nerves of steel, and Hikaru sitting at -1 is not having his best event. So it'll be very critical these next 2 rounds before we can predict what will happen in round 8.
Yeah, okay, we'll see if one of those or both of those players find themselves getting into their top form. A player who's been in pretty good form, maybe not his top form of all time, has been Peter Svidler, and in round 9, he's going to get the white pieces against Karjakin. So we're going to go as far as that as saying that could also be a tough game for Karjakin. Russian on Russian action, you know what we're talking about, the PG kind on the chessboard. What do you expect to happen there between Svidler and Karjakin?
Well, interestingly, Karjakin actually has a good record against Svidler, and they played a number of times various Russian events. But Svidler has shown to be capable in very good form lately. He did go up a 2-0 against him in the World Cup before really just falling apart and Karjakin coming back. But I do like Svidler's chances with the white pieces. He's a very solid, very smart player. And depending on how the standings start shaping up around the time the 9th game comes about, well, Karjakin might be looking to try to win with the black pieces, and that's when Svidler's at his best, when he's playing solidly and his opponent's trying to beat him. So look for Svidler to shake up the standings come round 9.
Of course, everyone remembers along your point of where Svidler's at his best when he actually beat Magnus Carlsen in the last round of the candidates before Magnus was the world champion that he is today, right? Magnus, of course, sort of backed his way into winning that candidates tournament, but Svidler is no stranger to winning in big games. It'll be exciting to see what happens there. Thank you for the matchup-by-matchup breakdown, Robert, and we look forward to doing it again in next week's Chess Center. Welcome back, Mike. It's time for time trouble. I don't know if I'm allowed to use the word time so many times, but either way, time is ticking, and I'm going to jump into the first question and say,
Time's
Mike,
up.
We now have 3 juniors from the United States inside the top 15 in the world. What does this say about the future for youth chess in America?
Next couple decades look pretty good. We've got Sevion, Zhang, and John Burke, all born in the 2000s. The next player on that list born in the 2000s is all the way down at number 42. Now, American football former star Chris Collinsworth hosted an event where Ugandan chess star Phiona Mutesi was the special guest. Disney's making a movie about her life. You think Disney will get it right?
Well, I don't know. You're the one reading the book right there behind you on the shelf. You'll have to let us know after you see it. Speaking of movies made out of chess story players' lives, Grandmaster Lombardi was once again in the spotlight after the movie Pawn Sacrifice came out, and now he's being talked about for the wrong reasons as he's apparently about to be evicted. Does this mean he needs to start spending less time gambling with chess games at Washington Square Park?
What, I mean, you can't pay New York City rent on $2 a game? That's news to me. The Giocchio piano has replaced the Spanish in numerous games in the Women's World Championship and in the candidates match. Is this the excitement we're looking for to avoid the Berlin?
I don't know. I think Fabiano just forgot now that he's transferred back to America as his federation. He's no longer required to play his token Italian game in every tournament. Now, staying on the candidates, we've seen 4 wins through 5 rounds. That's only 4 decisive games. Is this the kind of play we wanted out of the world's top players fighting for the ultimate right to battle Magnus Carlsen?
Well, I think as Topalov has showed, you probably can't win the event in the first go-round, but you can lose it. Maxime Vachier-Lagrav's exclusive analysis of the candidates has been so extensive that we've had to reprogram part of our code just to fit it all onto our website. Is this the first time a player has caused us to change our code?
Well, having been with the site from the beginning, I can't say whether that's totally true or not, but I can say that MVL's analysis has been so good, and it's no slight to any of the official chess magazines like New in Chess, Chess Life, that will cover it afterwards, but I think his post-game reviews are about as good as you're going to find anywhere after the candidates, so people must check them out in Peter Dawker's news reports at chess.com/news. Mike, time to let you go, time to sign off, and right on that note, get back to making these candidates videos that people can find on YouTube.
Thanks, Danny. I've been loving them.